Hello inmates, welcome to the cellblock Scorch week 254B. This is Bones, and I'm recording as the winner of this week's Scorch. This week's prompt was given by Octo, and it was, no such thing as a friendly bullet. Now, this prompt, I knew what I was going to write immediately, because I have a pivotal moment in one of my stories that has everything to do with this sentiment, and I was like, ooh, how convenient. I'll just write that. So, this is a cast of characters I've written about before, so if you've been listening to The Scorch, you may recognize them. I'll go further into that after, so as not to spoil it beforehand. So, for now, I'll just say, the title of this Scorch is Friendly Fire. Something was wrong. Something was horribly, terribly wrong. Maestro grabbed blindly at the railing, eyes glued shut in an attempt to ward off the sudden wave of nausea. He didn't have time for this. They were in the middle of a delicate operation. But the yelling and the sounds of bullets being fired were fading into the background as a ringing overtook his hearing. Something was wrong, and he only had 1 minute to fix it. The realization hit him harder than the sudden illness had, and he forced his eyes open with a grimace. All this time, cursing the eternal elation that came with the comedy haunting him like a shadow, of course it was now he could feel a tragedy coming. Now, when he couldn't allow any of these damn heroes to go down in what was largely his fight. Now, when Randall was here. He'd forgotten how terrible it felt. It used to feel like this all the time, and he cursed himself for getting so soft as to be taken off guard by something so simple. It was weak, and Maestro would not be weak. So he pushed himself to stand straight, disregarding the roiling in his stomach and the shaking of his hands as he surveyed the scene before him. The raid had been going as planned. The heroes, and Maestro and his minions who were not affiliated with them, despite what Stravarius insisted, had led the charge, breaking down the door and in through several windows simultaneously to keep her bastion's forces off balance. The police, led by Randall, had surrounded the area beforehand, and small groups followed the heroes into the building to provide extra forces and cover fire. Maestro had just succeeded in clearing the landing he'd arrived at when the genre shift hit, a small mercy in the onslaught of fate's slights towards him. Genres didn't simply shift like this in the middle of a story. In the middle of a fight. There was a catalyst for it. Someone that had the ability to impact the story so radically. Randall, of course, was Maestro's first thought, and he quickly sought the man's location. He was with the other police officers, suited up with protective gear and directing the forces. He didn't look to be in any immediate danger, but that didn't set Maestro's fears to rest. Less than 30 seconds now. 30 seconds before the genre changed and he wouldn't be able to stop it. With his higher vantage point, he should be able to find the threat, and he would do anything to stop it. An officer caught his eye. Lying on their belly outside the busted open doors directly across from where Maestro stood. Gun angled up to shoot into the building. Nowhere near Randall. But Maestro's stomach performed acrobatics when he found another possible target. Stravarius, that incorrigible fool, was standing near the door, fending off one of Rabastion's mooks, standing directly between the officer and Maestro, standing directly in the line of fire. It was foolish, of course. Stravarius's powers made it unlikely that he would get hit even if he got hit. The idiot couldn't catch a cold, much less a bullet. But he was turning. He had been facing Maestro, and he was turning so that the officer was in his line of sight. The bullet. If he saw it coming, it would hit. It would hit, and Straverius's powers would only speed his end. Maestro hadn't realized he was moving until someone yelled his name. Flash mob, he noted vaguely, head pounding painfully and swimming with worry that he would never admit to. She sounded more shocked than anything, and it was only then that he realized he was falling through the air. He jumped off the balcony. There wasn't time to find the stairs, not time to run down them if they had been right in front of him. 15 seconds. 15 seconds, and if he didn't do anything, Straverius would die. The choice was simple. He could survive a fall. Something snapped upon landing, his left foot throbbing painfully, but he stumbled forward until he caught his balance again. "Straverius!" he shouted, just as the man cocked his head upon catching sight of the officer. He'd seen them, and he'd noticed their gun was pointed at him. Now, even more squarely, Maestro noticed absently, though he didn't have much time to ponder it. Instead of a headshot, the bullet would bury itself directly in the hero's chest. Straverius turned at his name, but it was too late. He had seen, he knew, and if a gunshot rang from behind him, Maestro saw the surprise on Straverius's face when the shot sounded, but he wasn't sure if it was at the noise and what it was surely propelling into his back, or if it was just at Maestro barreling towards him. He wouldn't take the chance. Throwing himself the last few feet, driving his shoulder unrepentantly into Straverius's solar plexus to take the arrow down easier, the two fell back just in time for a bullet to fly over their heads. Straverius's arms came around Maestro as they fell, as if he were protecting him from the impact. Idiot. Didn't even hesitate, though it was Maestro's fault he was falling in the first place. "Maestro, are you okay?" Straverius demanded, miraculously unwinded despite the blow, peering down with open worry and moving his hands to Maestro's shoulders as if to lift him up and check for injuries. Which Maestro didn't need. He'd catalogued his own injuries well enough, thanks. But it did knock him out of the sagging relief he felt when the horrid pressure of the impending tragedy lifted, leaving the bubbly feeling of comedy that he would never admit to missing, and the soft comfort he would never tell Straverius he emitted naturally. "I'm fine," he sneered, pushing himself up instead, and noticing that the officer had disappeared. "Watch out for bullets, you numbskull. Or don't! That's the least you can do." He thumped Straverius firmly with his fist, which the hero didn't even have the courtesy to acknowledge, as his usual dopey grin spread across his face. "You were worried about me," Straverius beamed, and Maestro didn't dignify such a slight with an answer, instead rolling off and treating the hero to an elbow in the ribs. He was too busy to correct Straverius, of course. There were much more pressing matters, not the least of which was the dawning horror, now that he could think straight, that the bullet that almost ended Straverius's life had probably been meant for him. The room smelled of blood and magnolias.
Hi, it's Octo with Judge Comments. What can I say about this? Simply that these are my guys. I love them. I was there when they were born. I was there when Bones wrote the rough draft what they currently have. I was there when they decided that they needed to rewrite everything and were sad about it. And I will continue to be there because I love these dumb people. Maestro is just such a hot mess, and he simultaneously doesn't deserve and deserves everything that happens to him. And I love him and his silly little self and his refusal to, pony up to the fact that he actually cares about what happens to people. He's a little marshmallow man, and I adore him. This one won because Bones cheated and wrote these people. Okay, that's what happened. Cricket wrote me a very nice little poem, and I enjoyed it. It was very in the spirit of what I was thinking when I gave this prompt, but it wasn't various in Maestro interacting, so unfortunately it didn't win. And the other one that I got was from Styx, and it was fun. It had some really interesting prose in it, but you should just go read it yourself, because they were both very good. But unfortunately, you hit me with Maestroverse stuff, and I'm gonna fold. Bones knew what they were doing, you know? That's just how it is. Keep that fire burning.
Yay! A Maestroverse Scorch! Okay, so things. You've met a lot of these people before, Maestro and Stravarius and Randall for sure, and they are the main ones in this. So, an integral part of this piece is Maestro's power, which is being genre savvy. I'm sure I've mentioned it previously, but it hasn't been particularly relevant before, so I don't think I've talked about this particular bit. He can always feel what genre he's in. Comedy obviously feels like bubbly and giggly, tragedy feels nauseous, action feels like adrenaline, etc., etc. And whenever there's a genre switch, he feels it coming 1 minute in advance. And since genres don't switch for no reason in the middle of a story, that means there must be a catalyst. In this case, a comedy turning into a tragedy. This isn't like a super common thing, seeing as the vibes are nigh incompatible. But if you want an example, you could see the anime Gurren Lagann, which about halfway through becomes a lot more dark and terrible because the death of one character who has been single-handedly, keeping morale high. So, on that similar type of vein, Maestro feels the shift and goes, okay, so probably someone dies. Whose death could derail this whole story? Who is the linchpin? And of course, Maestro's first thought is Randall, because for those of you who listened to my week 222B Scorch, you may recall that Maestro and Randall were very close. And even though they don't talk anymore, Maestro's life still low-key revolves around Randall. Except he's thinking about this from a him perspective, and from an old one at that. It takes him a moment to realize that Randall hasn't been in this story all that much. He's just an endearing side character at most. And he's forced to confront the fact that Stravarius is actually the glue holding this whole operation together. Also relevant to this is Stravarius' power, which is basically that the world works how he thinks it does. And by that, I mean he lives life half-phased into a different reality in which he literally experiences the world differently. Like, if you convince him that the sky turns green during St. Patrick's Day, then he would literally look up and see the sky as green on that day. So, if he got shot but didn't notice, then he wouldn't suffer any consequences. But if he got shot and knew, or even if someone shot a blank at him and he thought he got shot, and especially if he thought it was fatal, then he would die. No matter if the actual injury was deadly, or even if he should have, even if there shouldn't have been an injury at all. Like, if you can convince him that he's been injured, then he will be. I just really love a superpower with logical drawbacks and limitations, and I feel like Stravarius has one of the best I've come up with. I love his nonsense. If you want to hear more about these characters, the episodes for week 4, 10, 222B, and 293B are all about them, and my Ember for week 20 on the Patreon is as well. So, feel free to check those all out, and maybe one day I'll actually finish writing the book so y'all can read it. It's like 200 pages already, but y'all, I started writing it in high school, and even though I still really love many of the ideas and a lot of the writing, it needs some major revamping, because my writing style has changed and gotten much, much better, and the story itself needed a lot of help. Anyway, but like one kind of spoilery but relevant thing to this, seeing as a cop tried to shoot Maestro through Straverius in this piece, is that the police are largely corrupt, right? They always have been in the story that I was writing. They're in the pockets of the big bads, who I will not tell you who they are here, but it's not really Rubastian, so but in the initial draft, Randall, who's not in anyone's pocket because he might be a cop, but he's a good man, rose through the ranks anyway because he's just a good guy. But now I'm like, oh man, no, he's just gonna be a little grunt forever because he's not a dirty cop. Like, they would never put him in a position of power. So, like, that's one thing that has to change, is that I have to rewrite a bunch of the stuff about Randall because he doesn't have any sway on the police force because everyone else is corrupt. Anyway, it's a lot of editing and it depresses me, so probably it will remain sadly there while I work on newer projects because I am weak. Yeah, that's all I had to say about that. So on to the next. My prompt for week 255B was, yes, you should have told me about the bone dragon in our backyard. Which is, again, a quote from one of my own aspirational stories. This one is actually a visual novel that we'll see if I ever get the gumption to do. But whatever the context, it's a funny statement to presumably have happened in an argument. So I was excited to see what the context people came up for was, and it was delightful, so look forward to it. Feel free to leave questions and comments. We love getting them, and I can't promise for the others, but I will definitely respond if you do. Also, it's been a minute since I've had an episode, so update on my projects. Last time we were waiting for the episode of Westward I'm in to drop, but now it officially has. It's episode 12 in the Steam Engine's Haze. And I would recommend listening to all of it if you like body horror and queer cowboys. It's a really cool story. We've also recorded most of the lines for season 2, and they've written all of season 3. It just needs to be edited. And that's the finale. So I can guarantee that it will not just lose traction and stop in the middle. Anyway, thanks for listening, inmates, and keep that fire burning. The Cellblock Scorch is a production of Stellacore, an independent group of nerds sharing their obsessions with the world. Links to all our projects, including Instagram, Tumblr, YouTube, Patreon, and Ko-Fi, can be found on our link tree, posted in each episode description. Follow us on Tumblr or Instagram to see the prompt of the day before the episode drops, and a quote from each Scorch the day after. If you would like to support our creative endeavors, you can give a one-time tip to the Ko-Fi of the writer of your favorite Scorches, or check out our Patreon. There, you can access the Scorches and episode transcripts for free, or sign up for Spark level support for $5 a month to gain access to our embers as well.